Good morning. Here we are. I'll bend down a little bit here. So welcome to Breakfast at Blake, the head of school edition. Thank you all for coming. It's a full house. Still more coming in. I hope you had a fabulous summer. You may be a little surprised. I am not Woody Kingman. My name is Allison Townley. I am an alumna of Blake. I am a parent of 3 students at Blake, and I'm the head of the advancement office at Blake. And I'm very pleased to be here today to welcome you to, I guess, which is now our first Breakfast at Blake of the school year. A couple announcements that I want to get off before I introduce our speaker. Everyone, please put on your calendar the next Breakfast at Blake, which is the reunion edition. We will have our Alumna of the Year. Diana Nelson will be speaking, so make sure you put that on your calendar. We will also be honoring our Alumni Award recipients for the Blake Spirit Award, the Jenny Hagan Blake Spirit Award, and the Athlete of the Year Award, the Alumni Athlete of the Year Award, which is a mother-daughter combination, very interesting. Don't forget about homecoming. We have parents and alum here today. So please put on your calendar homecoming. The kickoff is at 7 p.m. and it's our new Wolf Pack team. There'll be activities for all ages. Furthermore, I'm not going to go through all of our fall speakers, but I hope you got this. So this will tell you who our speakers are at the Breakfast at Blake this fall and all the other events that your advancement office is putting on for you. If you did not get this, you can pick one up in the advancement office and or go to the website. If you go to how to get involved, Alumni Association events, you'll see all of our events. And with that, I would like to move right in to introduce our speaker. So I am looking forward to hearing, and I'm sure you are too, hearing from our head of school, Ann Stavney. Dr. Stavney will be sharing her insights on education in the digital age. Not only did Ann grow up in Seattle, the hub of technology, or one of the major hubs of technology, but throughout her career as a student, as a faculty and administrator, she has worked very hard at incorporating technology and digital tools in the classroom. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ann Stavney.
Thank you, Allison. And welcome. Delighted to see all of you here today. And it feels particularly appropriate and exciting that we're talking about teaching and learning at Blake this week. As many of you know, we started on Tuesday with our 2nd through 12th graders. And today, at this very moment, we have our little ones, pre-K, K, and 1st grade, starting their first day of school. So it's thinking about teaching and learning is really what is at the forefront of our hearts and minds right now at this time of year. I have 2 goals in my remarks this morning. The first is I'd like to share with you just a few of the many, many ways we have expanded teaching and learning and the teaching and learning environment at Blake to include online spaces and digital tools. My second goal is to share with you some of the fundamental reasons why we have expanded in these ways and why we have enlarged our teaching practices and evolved them in these ways, and how students have benefited. So I'd like to start with a story about a butterfly. Ready?
Once upon a time there was a butterfly. The butterfly was flying along until it got its wings stuck in a tree. Then it broke its wing and it had to go to the butterfly fixing doctor. The butterfly fixing doctor fixed it. Then she was flying in a magical garden where the queen of the flowers was. But soon the queen of the flowers died. So she was the queen and everything was good.
Yes. This video clip was recorded by a pre-K student using an iPad. Students were asked to tell a story about something of their choosing and to illustrate that story with whatever materials that they wanted to use. And this student chose to paint his story. After mapping out the story idea, the student shared his ideas with classmates, got feedback on the story, and revised it. And then went into a little studio where they photographed whatever materials they had used, whether it was clay or Legos or paint. They photographed the materials to illustrate their story, and then they recorded audio over it. They did this all on their own. And the aim of this project in the pre-K classroom is to provide students with an autonomous way to create, to tell, to revise, to retell, and to illustrate a story of their choosing. The chief benefit of this project is that teachers and students can replay conversations to build on what they call in the classroom next experiences. And the idea of next experiences is to build on work that you have done previously through revision, through deeper thinking, through reapproaching a topic after getting feedback. And you can make it, therefore, more complex. Patty Loftus, who is one of our longtime pre-K teachers, many of you know Patty, she has seen this kind of work, which is enabled by the technology, to extend a child's attention span because it more deeply engages them in the creative process. As I see it, early childhood educators of 4, 5, 6-year-olds, they have long understood the power and the necessity of engaging students actively and in their own learning process, and we see that here in this project. The one-directional, largely oral delivery of concepts and information, the method of the primarily lecture style of instruction. Many of us were raised and educated with this mode of instruction. We have learned that it doesn't work with 4 and 5-year-olds. It never has. They can't sit still that long, and we have learned, however, over the last 30 years in education that it's not particularly an effective teaching model for older students either. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this older model of instruction that was prevalent through the 1980s. And it's what we use the metaphor of the sage on the stage, or the metaphor of teacher as pilot, students as passengers. In this model, the teacher is the purveyor of knowledge, and the teacher imparts that knowledge to a group of students. This is largely a lecture-style classroom, and the student has largely a passive role in this classroom. Students are taught information, and students reflect mastery of that knowledge and information on papers and tests. Some students acquire knowledge well in that model, and some do not. The method of delivery is rarely varied, and the pace of the class is also rarely varied and does not differentiate between individual students and how they are acquiring and applying and understanding the concepts. They're what we call checks for understanding for the group are fairly infrequent and don't modulate then the instruction that's happening in real time. The audience for the student learning is the teacher in this model. So assessments aren't necessarily connected to the real world and to authentic world problems. And the understanding then, the audience for papers, tests, projects, is really the teacher, the isolated teacher. This understanding of best practices in teaching has evolved dramatically in the last 30 years. And we've moved from the model of sage on the stage to using a different metaphor, one of guide by the side, or teacher as co-pilot. So rather than the teacher as the sole pilot of the classroom, we consider teachers and students as working together as co-pilots of the educational experience. So instead of talking about the teacher-centered classroom, we think about the student-centered classroom. This really reflects a shift in focus and purpose in the education space. So the aim is not to impart knowledge, but rather to teach students critical thinking, problem solving, communication, creativity. Content knowledge is certainly necessary, and it needs to be combined with skill development and application. We also know that students learn by doing, by working with content, evaluating it, applying it, comparing it, reflecting on it. And that students are motivated to learn when the context or the audience feels real and authentic. So they're not simply producing a paper or a test or an essay for an isolated reader, the teacher. An audience might be a panel of outside experts, it might be a group of students from another school, or it might be one's classmates, whether they're 4 years old or they're 18 years old. There's an audience to which the student is addressing. So what are the implications of this? We have seen a good deal of emphasis on project-based learning, where the audience is broadened beyond the teacher. I wanted to start by this context of the evolution and how we understand best practices in teaching, because it's very important to think about this evolution alongside the simultaneous explosion in the internet, in online spaces, and in digital tools. What has this meant, this simultaneous development? What has this meant for education broadly? And what has this meant for how we teach at Blake? It's meant many, many things. I wanted to highlight several of them this morning and then share with you some examples of what we're seeing in our classrooms. First, we understand now teachers as primarily designers of learning experiences. 3 parts to this role: they present content, they build interactions, and they design experiences for students through which and from which they learn. Second, we know that information is abundant and it's instantaneous. I mean, you all have, many of you, smartphones sitting in your pockets right now, maybe even the Apple Watch, and you can get things instantaneously. So students have full access to that information. What is one of the results of this fact? It's that it has accelerated the evolution in our teaching from the sage at the stage model to the guide at the side. Because the teacher can never know as much as the internet and cannot stay as current with rapid changes and latest research as online sources can reflect. Third, we know that information is instantaneous and abundant, and there's a lot of bad content alongside good content. So teachers must carefully choose the materials that they present, and we use the term curate, much like a museum curator. They must curate materials very carefully. And they must also teach students how to assess and evaluate sources for credibility, for accuracy, and for bias. And this is what we call information literacy, which is critical for our students to have developed as they go out to college and in the world. Fourth, we recognize that teachers have entered a teaching space with much less control and greater complexity. It has its challenges. It also presents fabulous opportunities for connection, for accessing resources and materials and people and students from around the world. Fifth, we know that the personal relationship between teachers and students remains critical. Teachers must be very deliberate about creating those relationships even perhaps more deliberate about creating those relationships in blended learning and online spaces as they are in brick and mortar classrooms. So within this framework of best teaching practices, I'd like to share a few more examples of how we're using online spaces and tools at Blake. So this photo is a screenshot of a video that a middle school science teacher, Matt Hall, uses to teach physics. And this image is an example of how students are using technology to discuss the concept of inertia, Newton's first law. In this lesson, students watch a short scene from the film Spaceballs, which is a 1987 parody of Star Wars. And in the scene itself, a spaceship suddenly takes off, and one of the characters in the movie has refused to wear his seatbelt. So Matt stops the video right at this point, and he asks the students to predict what will happen to this character without his seatbelt, this fellow right here. And so stops there. Students are able to then, on their own computers, draw vectors and describe in a sentence or two what they predict will happen. And so what they're doing is they're applying their conceptual knowledge of inertia, indicating through drawings and words what they will think will happen to this unseatbelted person experiencing extreme and sudden acceleration on a spaceship. And you can see here these lines of text. Those are the students' individual statements about and predictions about what they think will happen. Then Matt goes on to play the next part of the video, and they can assess, did these movie makers get it right? You know, did what happens in the movie, is that actually in keeping with Newton's law or not? And I've seen this lesson taught. Students are actively engaged in this exercise. They're analyzing the situation. They're applying what they know about the concept. And their thinking is visible to each other and the teacher. So this is more than just an example of technology in the science classroom. It's also an example of an application called Pear Deck, and there are a number of different applications like this, but I wanted to highlight this particular application because it's a classroom presentation device that allows students to join in on the screen. Teachers can post information, they can post questions, prompts, images, as we've just seen. And then students can interact with that image or question. Pear Deck allows students to respond to questions anonymously to the entire class. So you'll see that none of these sentences up here, comments, have student names. The teacher, however, is able to see which students are posting specific information. And teachers can review this either right during the presentation, the lesson, or after class. One of the biggest challenges in the classroom, for a teacher is to know what each student is understanding. How are they tracking? What are they thinking? What do they know? And whether to spend more time on a concept or not. And if so, where might the misunderstandings lie? So he or she can see this in the commentary, in the vectors, and see, okay, we need to spend more time on this concept. Or some of the class is getting this, some isn't. I'll call on somebody and say, could you explain a little bit more about your rationale? So enlist students who are grasping it to help with the instruction. So Pear Deck allows for teachers to have information about how the students are learning right in the moment. And good teachers, like we have at Blake, are able to take that feedback and continuously tailor and adjust their presentations and discussions right at that very time. In this case, in the lesson on Newton's first law, the teacher would be able to see how many students were able to predict the motion on the screen. If most students are correct in their predictions, the teacher can move on to another subject and follow up individually with students who still need help. And again, if the students are primarily incorrect in their predictions, the teacher can revisit the concept immediately and make sure students understand it. This slide shows another example of gleaning feedback in the moment through the application of Pear Deck. This is from a world history class, and the prompt asks students to locate early civilizations on this world map. Where did early civilizations develop? This would be on your right is an example of the student's screen, where he or she is putting a red dot, individual dots. This is where I think the early civilizations developed. And then what shows for the class is the groups, the combination of their entries on the screen. Again, the teacher can see right away if some locations or regions are missed and spend more time discussing those civilizations in class. Pear Deck allows, I think, for another breakthrough benefit in how we teach and learn. It creates a safe space for students to offer opinions on complex and charged issues. So, for example, if a teacher wants to gauge opinions on a matter of religion or race or class or politics, she can ask the students to share their opinions through this online format. Students know their answers will be anonymous to each other, and what I've seen and what our teachers have seen is they often feel more comfortable sharing their perspectives. So it's another advantage of this kind of application in the classroom. So let's move to another example of teaching and learning. This one is from an upper school language classroom. Upper School French project, and these images are examples of blogs. In the past decade, blogs or weblogs put together, they've become really commonplace. There are a number of online platforms, and any of you, and I'm sure a number of you here, have your own blog. Many people have turned to social media to share thoughts and perspectives. I would say blogs, however, remain the best way for individuals and small groups to share more detailed information, images, thoughts, reflections, and a way to publish their writings. Blogs are sort of an online diary, and it can be a personal chronological account that reflects the styles and interests of the author and also how their thoughts evolve over time. In this upper school French project, teacher Savannah Desi Olive, she teaches this course where students create their own blogs that are focused on an issue that deeply interests them. Over the course of the semester, each student is required to have 10 blog entries. Some of the issues that students selected in their last spring include women's rights, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, global health, and climate change. So the students are asked to find news articles about their issue, and they must use Francophone sources. And their news sources cannot come from just France, but must include other French-speaking countries, whether it's Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia, North America. And the purpose is for students to see how different countries, how different cultures and publications present a charged issue. The teacher, Savannah Desi Olive, invites librarians into the French classroom to instruct the students about how to research, how to analyze, how to evaluate their sources, and how to look at particular publications and articles and understand their potential bias, their credibility, the depth of their research and scholarship. The research staff also helps students with the logistics of building their own blog, from layout to photos to the organization of their posts. At the end of 10 weeks, each student presents his or her blog and their issue to the class. And they make this presentation to the class as well as a panel of French-speaking guests who are invited to Blake for the presentation. Panel members are professionals who speak French throughout the Twin Cities. Students present their findings, what they learned about the issue, and how their own perspective might have changed as they learned over time and read these different publications from around the world. And the panel and the classmates offer questions and commentary to the presenter. So this exercise gives students a way to work on their language skills, clearly, through reading and writing and speaking and formally presenting, all in French. It also gives them depth and new perspectives on a topical issue. And as I mentioned earlier, it often introduces them in a very real way to the concept of bias in journalism and offers them a platform to leverage technology to share their own thoughts and ideas with an audience. Students also comment at length on the blog of two of their classmates, and they do that throughout the term. So you'll see over here on your right a student comment on another student's blog. And so they are also learning about the issue and engaging with their classmate in French about their writing and reflection. So of course, French classes aren't the only place our students are engaging with technology with a global focus. As many of you know, Blake is the only school in Minnesota to be a member of the Global Online Academy, or GOA as the acronym. What is the GOA? It's a network of 63 leading independent schools from around the world, and students who are in member schools, GOA member schools, can elect to take GOA courses, and these courses are taught by instructors, by teachers at each of these leading independent schools. Quite often they're advanced or specialized courses, and it's often a junior or senior who takes the courses. These are courses they wouldn't necessarily have access to at our own school or at their member school. Right now, we offer over 30 GOA courses to Blake students. This fall, we have 18 who are enrolled in GOA courses. And some of the sample classes include Japanese language and literature, Arabic, 9/11 in a global context, global philosophy, digital journalism, and multivariable calculus. Today I'd like to focus briefly on an initiative that is happening within this GOA framework. It's called Big History, and it holds big promise in the way we create global learning communities through technology. Many of you might be familiar with the Big History Project. There's been quite a bit of writing about it. It's been profiled in the New York Times, viewed millions of times on a TED Talk, and championed by Bill Gates, who funds the Big History Project through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Simply put, the concept of Big History, we aim to teach middle and high school students 13.8 billion years of history in one semester. So how do we do this? A big job. Rather than focusing on the chronological telling of events, history is explored in multiple scales of time and space. The idea is to reveal unifying themes in knowledge and to develop students' science literacy. Blake is playing a leading role in developing the Big History curriculum for the Global Online Academy. Last year, we partnered with two other GOA schools, Columbus Academy in Ohio and King's Academy in Jordan. And the three schools worked together in developing this curriculum. The course explored not only the content of Big History, but also what does it mean to be an online learner. We had 50 ninth graders who took the course, and it met 4 days a week. There were also smaller learning groups that spanned all three schools that gathered at least once a week, And a lot of work, collaborative work, was done between the students at the 3 schools, largely through video postings. The collection of the partnering schools helped to underscore the thesis of the course, which is that we all share the same human history that began with the Big Bang. Assignments focused initially on Darwin's theory of evolution, and then by the end of the course, they were exploring the fundamental question of how do we reconcile science and faith. While the subject matter of the Big History Project is exciting and different, certainly, than anything these students have explored before, the very personal, global connections that this type of learning allows is perhaps what the students might remember most. This year, Beth Calderon, one of our upper school history teachers who has been the point person for this at Blake, she and her GOA colleagues are continuing to refine the Big History course and have expanded it to 2 sections this year, so nearly 100 students. And we have also had the Jakarta International School in Indonesia join the class to further enhance the global nature of the course. So I'd like to close now by sharing one student's reflections on her experience in the Big History course.
And so, first of all, I would like to thank everybody who made this year phenomenal. All the Blake kids, Columbus kids, and the King's Academy kids. And I think this course was really great because we not only got to learn about the concepts of big history, like increasing complexity, but we also got to learn about the people behind the screens. And so thank you to all of those people. And for new big historians, I would just like to say this course is just like memorable. And I'd like to tell you about this one experience. We were on Skype, the first time we were Skyping, and we just got to see these people and really connected. Like, you made those people more 3-dimensional. And also, I would urge you to learn about the people from different places because they have new and fresh and innovative ideas that you would have never heard before. So, thank you to all these people who made this year great, and hello, new big historians.
So I think excellence in teaching, it's still a combination of science and art, and it's still highly relational. And I feel at Blake that we are using online spaces, we're using digital tools, both judiciously and creatively, to teach content and also teach critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration. So thank you all for coming this morning, and I would love to entertain questions and comments that you might have. Yes?
And could you talk a little bit about the training for the teachers, the new technology training provided for them, and how do you provide, or how do they find the time to do the training more efficient?
Great question. We have a number of ways that teachers are trained. We have always in the week, like we put on the last week before school starts, we have workshops in using technology tools. We also have on each campus, in each division, we have a point person who's really called a technology integration specialist who works with the teachers. Our teacher librarians are also very adept at technology integration. And we have found that if we really shift the conversation to not, what is the tool and how do I use it, but rather what is the teaching and learning experience I'm trying to create? And then what is the technology tool that will best help me do that? Teachers and students, I think, feel that is exactly what teaching is all about. And then the tool assists in that designing that experience or that interaction or presenting the content. As many of you know, the students are well ahead of most of us with the technology tools. We often find if a teacher says, I'm going to use this tool, Pear Deck, for example, there's a little fumble at the beginning of class, a student will jump up and fix it. And so, teachers have me, there's one right here helping me. The teachers need to be more comfortable with that, again, that kind of co-piloting model of having that assistance from students with the tech tools. But the point is really the teaching and learning that can happen with the tools. And I continue to ask the question, and I think it's important that we keep, when we have proposals for buying this or that, or in terms of tech tools, we need to ask the question, technology tools for the purpose of what? Because we are a teaching and learning institution, and the tech tools help us do that. So, yes?
So, totally cool, I love it, it's amazing. What's your opinion? I mean, what's coming down the pipe? Where will we be in 5 years? It moves so fast. Where will we be in 10 years?
Yeah, a great question. Many schools are, the question for schools is what are we trying to do with technology? What is our mission, essentially? And where we can go astray is not being clear and kind of staying focused on the teaching and learning space and what is good teaching and learning. And I think there will be just an explosion of more applications and more online spaces, and I think our teachers will continue to explore and create, and we've had a number of our teachers now teach the Global Online Academy courses, and they find that teaching that course reshapes how they teach their brick and mortar classroom, because again, they're introduced to these new spaces that helps them rethink, how do I check for understanding, how do I create an authentic audience, and so forth. A parallel conversation, which I decided not to get into today, otherwise we'd be here till school lets out this afternoon, is the whole question of programming and coding. And that's a content area that has really also exploded. And how are we teaching those skills, really teaching logic and problem solving through coding? And some schools are now requiring it, like we have a language requirement. This is another language requirement. We are certainly expanding our offerings in that area, but that will be a question we continue to revisit, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years. What that particular content area, which is new, to what degree do we need our students to have some familiarity with it? Yes?
Does this methodology have a theorist and a school and a name? Like Chicago Math, how is this come about?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say it's really not one particular school that owns it or mode of thought. I think at every kind of different developmental level. We have, for example, in our pre-K, first grade classrooms, many of you familiar with the Emilio Reggio method of teaching, which is the hands-on discovery, what we call constructivist-based learning, where students are learning through their own experiences. That is a method, as I tried to suggest a little earlier, that is a way of thinking that has existed for a long time at the early childhood level, and we're recognizing its application and validity for older students now throughout the disciplines and grade levels. Yes?
First of all, I want to congratulate you. It's reassuring as alumni to hear the story of the school and participate in progress. At the
Fabulous.
same time, any organization I've been associated with has problems.
Yes.
And I'd like to know what makes you lie awake at night.
She's 7 years old. That's right.
Maybe you could tell us about the things that you have to grapple with in your leadership position.
Sure. All right. Thank you. One of the things that is, I think, attention for independent schools across the country, and it certainly is very much in the forefront of what I'm thinking about at 2 a.m., is how do we provide access for students for Blake education? How do we ensure that we have the most talented and brightest students across the Twin Cities at Blake? How do we do that at the same time that we keep a Blake education affordable? So rectifying that tension between access and affordability is constantly, it's not a problem to be solved, it's really a dilemma, and that's something that keeps me awake at night. When we, many of you know, as our admissions committees rank our students, these are our top 20 kids to enter into the 6th grade or, whatever grade level it might be. When we, have to sit at that list and say, look at that list, number 12 and 13, we can't accept because we don't have the financial resources. That keeps me awake at night because I want those kids at Blake. They have so much to contribute and so much that they can learn. And so again, marrying that access, financial access and affordability is a lot of the work of the school right now. It's tremendously meaningful work, and that's, I would say, is one of the things that keeps me up at night. Yes, Malcolm?
Question. We're increasingly global.
Yes.
You are leading the way. We also are increasingly immigrant in this area, and you're leading the way. To do all of this, we need a lot more money to be able to get this done. Without getting into the capital campaign details, that's not my point for the question.
Okay.
How do we carry across to all of us as alums the value of an increasing amount of money that's available for sliding fee scholarships?
Mm-hmm. The way I think of it is, when I look at what Blake has been since 1900, it puts academic excellence at the core and at the center, and that's who we have always been and who we will be, is that we are providing an academically excellent education for our students. Now that is not a static thing. Academic excellence is ever evolving, and I understand diversity as necessary to academic excellence. It's not an option, and it's not an end in itself. It is necessary for academic excellence. If we are going to have students learn from people who are like them, who are different from them, and to learn how to interact with people from around the world. I know many of you have professions right here in this room. You're interacting with people from around the world every day. And our students need to be equipped to do that. And we need to teach them those skills in the classroom. And so that's, as I understand diversity, it's with that goal in mind. And that's why I think it matters so much. Yes?
All right, so my name is Michael Elliott, and I've got a 3rd grader at the Hopkins campus. And so as I listen to your presentation, I know, this summer we spent doing Scratch programming.
Yes.
Which is a program, coding program developed at MIT for children. Mm-hmm. And then we did learning through Duolingo. We learned Spanish through Duolingo
yes.
as well. Mm-hmm. And so with the Scratch programming, she can build something, come back the next day, improve it, we did that kind of thing. But, and I did some coding myself, so I was able to help her with that. Mm-hmm. But my question to you is, as Blake is moving into this online space, how do we bring parents along so that they can still help with that?
Yeah, great question. This is actually a fabulous question. We, a number of you are middle school parents, and we have introduced a new learning management system this year called Canvas. We're rolling it out in the middle school for various reasons. And as I see it, Canvas has tremendous opportunities, not only for teaching and learning that happens between teacher and student at Blake, but also for parent education. So we are really looking at using Canvas for giving mini lessons, exercises, sharing with parents what we're doing in the classroom and how they can help students. So we have this great platform that we can use for just what you're describing, and that we plan on piloting a few of those units this year. Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'll take 2 more questions. Bob.
I think too, just speaking to the 2 gentlemen, the school model and the economical model needs to be reworked in a big way, looking at it more of a holistic approach, like Malcolm was talking about analysis. But you mentioned a couple of different times here this critical thinking,
Yes.
which also involves writing, speaking, that. Do you have a formal program? How do you do that to where critical thinking teaches people how to learn, not what to think, more around it? But do you have a formal program where it becomes part of their process by the time they graduate? They use that tool all the time versus at a college level, you take a critical thinking course in your second year, you take the course and you never apply it. So my question is, do you have a formal way of integrating that into the...
I would say yes. I would say that virtually every one of our classrooms, that is the way we are shaping the projects, the assignments, the collaborative work, is for students to learn enough content, so that learn the content that they need, but then apply it. Whether it's in creating, as you saw with the 4-year-old, creating a story, revising the story, deepening it, giving an image, to the 18-year-old who's doing the French blog, which is, an analysis of and reflection on one's thinking over time about a particular issue. When we're at our best, we are doing that in every single classroom. We're asking students to apply knowledge, to reflect on it, to analyze it, to combine it with concepts that they're using in learning in other disciplines. So we assess for that, certainly, in our faculty evaluations, where we really focus on how are you doing this in a way that is appropriate to your grade level, your developmental stage, and your subject area. Take one more, yes.
Well, my question is, what is considered a current affair today? Because, what's a current affair at 8 o'clock in the morning is no longer a current affair at 5 o'clock. Yes. And so how do you, kind of decide what is going to be a current affair? And then within that, there's so much misinformation that gets fielded out over time. So how is the school dealing with current affairs?
Well, I think to your question of current affairs, we often leave it to the students to select something that really engages them. And it can't be something that just flashed on the news one time, or in one, it needs to be something that they can explore with depth over time, as you see in the French assignment, from a number of different perspectives, cultures, countries. And so that's something that's sustained. And and then the teacher guides them in that there's enough complexity and depth and angles, perspectives on this that it will really engage you. But so I would just say that the teacher working together with the student in selecting topics that will allow for that kind of rich analysis. As far as the evaluating information, I mentioned earlier kind of teaching of information literacy is so important, and we do it starting really in second grade, actually kindergarten, when they do their animal project. They're like, what are good sources? Where can you find good images and information? Is it Wikipedia? Is it, what is it? And often, depending on the grade level, they require some print sources so that students know what those are, and what's valuable about them, what you can get there and not elsewhere. As we get into the high school, they will require scholarly articles that have been refereed, and so they understand what is that, what does that mean, what does that say about the depth of research that represents. So they're taught different skills and more complex skills and information literacy as they become more capable and doing more complex work. So, great. Thank you for the question. Thank you all for coming this morning. Really nice to see you all out here, and we're looking forward to a great school year. Thank you.